This video is going to be a little bit shorter and a little bit less edited just because it's around Christmas time and I kind of want to spend some time with my family, so let's just get straight into it. Dahlia is probably one of the most interesting supports that we've ever received in the game. The most interesting part of her kit is that she raises the damage floor for everyone in the game by buffing all the characters by the same amount and making everyone capable of being a DPS. But what do I mean by that? Have a quick look at this. You might notice that despite being different paths, different elements and even different archetypes, they still do basically the same amount of damage as each other. This is because the damage that Dahlia adds from the super break on her skill only scales with level, toughness damage and break effect. So if the characters have the same exact builds, you could make a Harmony Action Advanced support deal the same amount of damage as a Fire Erudition DPS. And this is because these attacks deal the same amount of toughness damage. This means that in theory, any character that deals toughness damage can become a DPS to varying amounts of success. So if she can buff everyone by basically the same amount, what makes a character particularly strong with Dahlia? There are four main things that allow characters to perform better in Dahlia team comps. The first one is having high and/or frequent toughness damage. The second thing is a character bringing their own buffs that can increase break damage. Things like Res Pen, Defensive Shred, Break Effect of course, True Damage and Vulnerability. The third is having kit synergies with break mechanics, such as characters like Himiko and Sushang who gain benefits on break. And the final thing that makes a character really strong with Dahlia, very surprisingly, is being a sustain. This is because of Dahlia's trace that gives you an additional amount of break effect if Dahlia receives sustain from a teammate. And this amount of break effect can be actually really high, like above 100 in most cases. Just from looking at this criteria, there might be a few characters that come to mind that might be good partners with Dahlia. Even characters that aren't necessarily break DPS. Characters like Acheron, who have a large amount of toughness on their ultimate and Res Pen, can be surprisingly good with Dahlia. Or a character like Gallagher, who deals a massive amount of toughness damage, and he's a sustain, so he gets the full benefit of Dahlia's break effect sharing passive. This leads us to the next section, MoC Testing, where I tested Dahlia with a ton of teams, even some characters that you might have thought of as dead, or not synergistic with Dahlia. Before we talk about my experience in MoC with all these teams, I want to talk about the testing setup. So basically, I chose MoC 12-1 because it is a more difficult scenario for breakers. There's two enemies with large break bars and two enemies who can lock their toughness. So this would be considered a typical scenario before Dahlia's release where break characters would have struggled quite a lot. Every team was tested 3 times and the best result was taken. They were either using the Iron Cavalry set or where there was synergy, the Eagle set. Every character used the exact same team to clear, which is Dahlia E0 with Cipher's S1, Fugue E1 S1, but her S1 isn't necessary since it doesn't proc until the enemy is broken. Ruame E1 with S3 DDD because I'm free to play, so I don't have enough DDD, sorry. So with this sustainless core, these were the results. Keep in mind that my relic quality is not the greatest because I'm free to play and I didn't really farm that much for Iron Cavalry, so Boothill did quite well, which makes sense because he's the only real break DPS that I tested with 1 cycle, but we'll talk about him later. I think it's way more interesting to talk about some of the other characters that actually performed very, very well with Dahlia. My personal standouts were Cipher, Acheron, Sushang and Gallagher. Cipher does very, very well on this team. It almost felt like a machine. So Dahlia converts toughness damage into break damage and Cipher converts break damage into true damage and so on and so forth. The fact that she has vulnerability increases the break damage of the whole team, and also she actually does a decent amount of toughness herself. So I think that we could crown her the best quantum break DPS in the game right now. If you have Cipher, I think it's worth giving it a try as probably her best main DPS team comp. Acheron performed surprisingly well. Well, I shouldn't say surprisingly because I've been playing Super Break Acheron for quite some time now. But now it feels like more of a complete team, especially if you're a lower investment Acheron player who doesn't have her light cone maybe or doesn't have her E2, because it has 2 nihility units in it, so you have access to Acheron's higher multipliers if you want to build her as a crit break hybrid DPS. And if you want to go all in and use Acheron as a break DPS, Resolution Shines on Acheron will be actually quite a strong choice, and you can use artifacts that have defense main stats on her chest and orb and still have incredibly high output. Sushang really surprised me because I've been meaning to build her for a very long time, and full disclosure, I did this Abyss testing and I didn't even level up her traces, so she could have actually done a lot better than what I was able to do with the free cycle clear. I think the thing that made it feel so good was the fact that Sushang has so many things in her kit that synergize with break, and the fact that she has a lower likelihood of getting hit. It made the runs a lot smoother when running sustainless as well. Now, the character that fully blew my mind was Gallagher. I genuinely think that he is a meta DPS now, as in Gallagher is now a better DPS than most of the 2.0 cast and some of the 3.x teams as well. He's literally the Garming of HSR, a 4-star fire DPS that can compete with the 5 stars. The thing that makes Gallagher so damn good is the fact that he already has really high toughness damage, and he provides break damage vulnerability, which increases the whole team's damage. The fact that he's a sustain makes it so much more synergistic as well, because the team core of Ruan, Fugue and Dahlia is so strong already. But when you're a sustain, you get the additional bonus of the break effect sharing from Dahlia. This is why DPHT also performed quite well, but something felt different with Gallagher. The clear was incredibly comfortable, and I was actually so impressed that I went on to clear Pure Fiction and Apocalyptic Shadow using main DPS Gallagher, and they cleared very well. I think this is a really good thing for new players who are just picking up Dahlia now, because Gallagher is on her banner. So if you wanted to, you could form a full team from just this banner, being DPS Gallagher, Dahlia, Ruan and HMC. This will be a team that's strong enough to carry you to the end game. I'd also like to make some honourable mentions to Dr. Ratio and March 8th. With Hunt March 7th, I already knew that she was going to do quite well just because of how her kit is, and the fact that she gets additional toughness scaling from buffing Dahlia means that her damage is actually really high. You should be careful when speed tuning March 7th in Dahlia, because if you do it wrong, the performance drops a lot because of how their follow-ups are triggered after their turns. The reason why Dr. Ratio gets an honourable mention is because there's nothing intrinsically in his kit that would make him strong with break. He doesn't provide any generic buffs like vulnerability, and he doesn't have any explicit synergy with break. But just the sheer amount of toughness damage he does from his ultimate and his skill allows him to deal a surprising amount of damage. So Dahlia can make anyone a DPS as long as they deal a decent amount of toughness damage, which is great, but she does have a few weaknesses that limit her capabilities. The first one is that, respectfully, her numbers are quite shit. She has relatively low super break scaling compared to the other super breakers, and her other buffs like weakness break efficiency and 18% defensive shred aren't quite enough to compensate for that. The problem is her best buff actually comes from her break effect sharing, which is locked behind her running a sustain, but the damage that you lose from running a sustain instead of running another support isn't that worth it in most cases. This means that to get her full potential out, you need to run her with strong buffers who can bump up her numbers and improve her output, like Fugue, HMC and Ruan. In my testing, the sustainless teams were often just a lot stronger than the teams with a sustain, and the fact that you could build defensive stats on your super breakers without losing much damage made it more compelling. What her low numbers also mean is that you can't really run her as the main or only support in the team, in the same way you could run someone like Robin or Ruan or even Tribby. This leads on to her second weakness, which is her lack of action value delay. Because her output is so strong in sustainless teams, not having any action value delay makes the team more vulnerable to dying. This weakness is especially noticeable in teams that don't have Ruan, because the enemies aren't delayed for that long, so they regenerate their toughness bars really quickly and just attack you and you die. The last thing I consider a weakness in my first impressions of testing is kind of a niche weakness that only really bugs me, I think, because no one else is dumb enough to try Remembrance Break, but the fact that her dance partner does not apply to member sprites is so annoying. Like, there could be so many good Remembrance Break DPS, but they just don't have access to Dahlia's multiplier. This is gonna sound crazy, but genuinely, Castoris and Evernight both have really high toughness damage, and they have vulnerability and respen. They would have been amazing break DPSs, but the fact that their memo sprites can't be dance partners just puts that whole idea in the bin, which is kind of sad. So for the rest of the video, I'm just going to talk about Boothill. So apologies for anyone who's not really a fan, but I hope it's interesting enough and you learn something new about Boothill. So how have things changed with our route into in gunslinging Cowboy? And how does Dahlia change things? Because it's Christmas Eve and I just want to get out of here and eat some dry turkey and Yorkshire puddings, I'm going to answer the 3 most common questions I've gotten about Boothill and Dahlia together, which are: what are his best team comps now? How do I speed tune now with Boothill and Dahlia, especially with an action advancer? And should I pull for Fugue or Dahlia? First things first, his team comps. With Dahlia's release, we officially have a best in slot premium team for Boothill, which is Dahlia, Fugue E1, and Ruan preferably E1 as well. This team is incredibly strong and allows you to just run through content. I was even able to clear pure fiction with this team. But you probably already know how good this team is, so what about other teams? So if you're running Boothill with Dahlia, with a sustain or another DPS, you're going to have to choose between Ruan or Fugue. In Dahlia's pre-release, I said that running her with Ruan was preferable to running her with Fugue E0. And now after testing, I can honestly say that Fugue, for most people in most scenarios, will probably be better than Ruan if you can only run one additional break support. And this is mostly because of Ruan-Mei's uptime issues with her ultimate, and the fact that Fugue provides that super break multiplier to your 4th slot sub DPS or sustain. I do have a small tip for teams running Boothill, Dahlia, Ruan-Mei and a sustain, and that is, if you're feeling like the team is a bit lackluster in output, build everyone crit. So build Boothill, Dahlia and your sustain or crit, especially in the case of DPHT who's buffing Boothill's attack. The additional talent scaling damage should actually tip the scales and make the team feel on par with the few teams, along with the additional utility that Ruan-Mei supplies. There are also a few teams where I'd consider running Ruan-Mei as outright better than running Fugue. These are the new Boothill teams with an action advancer. Which leads us to our second question: how do you speed tune Boothill teams, especially teams with a dedicated action advancer? So one of the big things that Dahlia provides is a speed boost to Boothill when he implants a weakness. This is massive because it provides a lot more speed tuning opportunities for Boothill, but the problem is that the speed boost is reliant on him using his ultimate. So in scenarios where you can't use his ultimate or you charge his ultimate too slowly, it can actually mess up your speed tuning quite heavily. With that caveat, let's talk about a new category of speed tuning for Boothill, SuperSpeed Boothill. A level above Hyperspeed Boothill, which goes at 200 speed. SuperSpeed Boothill goes at pseudo 267 speed, which allows him to go 4 times in the first cycle. The main issue with calculating the speed requirements for this type of thing is that there's so many different variables to whether you can get your ultimate on time or not. So it can vary from anywhere from 172 speed if you only have 1 proc of DDD to 157 speed to get 267 pseudo if you have 2 procs of DDD. And anything relating to SuperSpeed Boothill requires the Eagle set. You can't do this without the Eagle set. Also consider, to get to this kind of speed, you have to sacrifice break effect substats, so you will naturally be dealing less damage to get an additional turn. With this in mind, let's talk about the new speed tuning setups with action advances. So there's 2 setups, a complicated one that requires Sunday, and a less complicated one that works better with Bronya. RMC was also a very good action advancer in my testing, but they don't really have specific setups, so you kind of have to figure it out on your own. But I can tell you about the Sunday setup. The Sunday setup involves some advanced speed tuning, which is inspired by Aglaia, and how you speed tune her with Sunday by using slow Sunday, which is half the speed of Aglaia. Similarly, in the case of Boothill will be going pseudo 267 speed, and Sunday will be slow at pseudo 134 speed. In this setup, instead of Sunday going right after Boothill goes 2 times before Sunday even gets to have a turn. This results in the same amount of turns as having pseudo 200 speed on your action advancer. By increasing the speed requirements on Boothill, you can decrease the speed requirements on Sunday to basically nothing, and still have the same amount of turns as running a hyperspeed Sunday. The only problem is that Boothill needs to charge up his ultimate, so if there's no mobs, you can't run the speed tuning setup. I've already spoken a little bit about the other setup, which is running a pseudo 200 speed action advancer. So you run Boothill fast enough to get to the pseudo 200 speed breakpoint, and you get your action advancer to be as close to -1 speed as possible. Because action advancers don't have that much access to speed in their traces, pseudo 200 is usually the upper limit of their possible speed. This results in a total of 6 turns in the first cycle, like the other setup as well. But if you have Bronya's E2, which gives you 30% speed, and you're still running Boothill on the Eagle set, you can sneak out a 7th turn with Boothill and Bronya in the same setup. And now the final question, Dahlia or Fugue? So ideally, if you want to play Boothill, you want to pull both of them. But I would personally suggest to pull Dahlia over Fugue. This is because Dahlia is just more catered towards the content that we're being given. Fugue is more synergistic with Boothill, but it's very likely that new break content will be designed around Dahlia's mechanics. So if you're missing out on Dahlia's core mechanics, you're going to feel yourself falling behind. I've already seen people struggling with just normal break in the current anomaly arbitration. So that's all for this video. I hope that you see Dahlia a little bit differently now, and I hope that you learned something new. Happy holidays everyone as well. Sorry for the minimal editing, but it is Christmas and I have stuff to do. So see you in the next one. Bye.